Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The World According to Elmer is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing top 40 hits from the 60s through the 80s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River. Welcome aboard. We're headed for the World According to Elmer, with hosts Gerry Sorensen and Pat Morrow. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it there. Better buckle in and enjoy the ride. Here come our hosts now.
Buckle in and enjoy the ride.
Here we go. It's good to be here with you folks. It is the World According to Elmer on the Crooked River Radio Network. Glad to have you with me. I'm Gerry Sorensen, and with us tonight is our Elmer, Pat Morrow. I am KG8RRY, and Pat is N80QP. Pat, how is your week going?
I was waiting for a phonetic.
Waiting for what?
A phonetic.
A phonetic?
Yeah,
well,
You're slipping,
the other
Jer.
one that I've been using is kind of worn out now, and I haven't had a chance to think a new one up.
You're slipping, Jer.
I'll have something figured out.
Yeah, you're slipping. I guess can we start this off with a joke?
Let me ask you a question. Is the audio really, really loud, or have my ears finally gone out on me?
I don't think it's loud.
Oh, the audio over on my end is really, really loud. It's really hot.
Let me do some checking here.
But anyway, while you check that, it will surprise you to know that I have gotten some QSL cards.
Oh, did you really?
And so let's start the show out tonight with a couple of QSL cards while the boss there checks the audio on the program to make sure that we sound all right for you guys out there. First of all, I got a card from Illinois that I thought was kind of curious. Now, this is a nice card, and I'd like to thank the gentleman that sent it to me, the operator, KC9IL, and he's from Illinois. Go figure. Great call sign. But I thought the card was very interesting because I looked at the card, and it's one of the homemade cards. And you know how I feel about homemade cards. They're great. When people will take the time to invest in their own card and create their own card, that's awesome stuff. When I first started out, it was because I had no money, and I made my own QSL cards because I couldn't afford to order any. But I had made a card that I think is interesting when you view it in light of this card. So this is the card that I received, KC9IL. Here is the card that I started out with that I created myself. And there, of course, that's my call sign, KG8RRY. Do you find the cards in any way to be interesting when you compare one to another? Now, I did add our mascot, our high school mascot up here. Now, he doesn't have that over here on his, but he has the ARRL, and he has the exact same layout as my card. So, I don't know. How did he get this card? When I started with this card, did I send him one of these cards? It's a mystery, and we'll never know. But you know, this is the Halloween show, and so what a great way to start. So at any rate, thank you for sending me this card. I looked at it, and I thought immediately, I know that card. And sure enough, I did know that card because it was the same as my card back in the day. So there you go. Here's the color card of the week. This gentleman sent this beautiful card of his station. I always like getting cards that have people's stations on them. I like to compare what my station looks like as compared to their station. And it is interesting what some people run equipment-wise. There's some folks like me that like the old vintage gear. And then there are the people out there that have all the latest and the greatest and the Elecrafts and the 7300s and the 991As and all that latest stuff. So no two stations look the same. Here's WI9WI. And that's a beautiful card. This gentleman is in Madison, Wisconsin, and that was a nice CW call. I remember his call sign. Whenever I hear somebody's call sign, Pat, I sit there, I tap it out. See what kind of a CW call sign that the FCC gave them. Here's N9 GVP. Nice card. Thank you very much for sending it. He's over there. He lives in the same town, I think, as the Simpsons live. Don't the Simpsons live in Springfield, Illinois,
Yeah.
I do believe?
Yep.
Marge and, all of them. Here's an eye popper. Whoa! There is no question what this man's call sign is. You can see this one from a mile away.
Yep.
And I would like to thank K4EWG for sending this along. He has quite an antenna farm. He lists not only his radios on the back of the card, but he also lists all the antennas that he has. This whole entire paragraph here is nothing but antennas. And I mean, he's got everything. He's got the tower. He's got the inverted V. He's got the inverted L. He's got the hex beams. He's got everything. If it's in the DX catalog, this man owns it. Trust me. There isn't anything that he doesn't have out in his backyard that can be purchased. Trust me. And those are our QSL cards for this week, Pat.
Sweet.
So this upcoming week is a big week. This is a holiday week. And of course, Halloween is coming up this Sunday. And I guess they're having some special programs here on Crooked River Radio for Halloween. So I thought tonight we could talk about some of the spooky things about radio, some of the things that have happened on radio, or the things down through the years that have people wondering, how could that happen? Or what was that? Or what was the mystery behind this? I remember when I was growing up, there was a story that went around that was very popular. In fact, it made national news. It was so popular. But there was a station down in Dallas, Texas, from the 1960s that had gone off the air. They had gone bankrupt, and they had closed the station down, and it was just a thing of the past. People remembered it, but it was no longer there any longer. And some years later, imagine over in England, of all places, folks were sitting down to dinner. They were having their dinner, and they were watching their TV. And all of a sudden, at a break time in between two programs, there appeared on their TV a signal from a station in Dallas, Fort Worth, and it was a station break. And it had the channel number, and it had Dallas, Fort Worth, and it had the call sign on it. And it appeared for about 30 seconds, and then it faded away. And so, boy, that got everybody excited. People began to call the police. They called the office of radio over there, and pretty soon, of course, all this made it back to the United States, and the FCC got involved, and there was this just big hubbub about how this signal could have appeared in England. And it became even more mysterious when it came out that this station in Texas had gone off the air years and years before. And I remember all these scientists coming on TV and trying to explain how this signal could have gone to outer space, and how it could have struck a planet and come back to Earth, and it could have appeared in England during just exactly that time when people were sitting down to dinner, and they could have seen a station break from a television station that had been off the air for years and years.
Where is my Twilight Zone music?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Well, come to find out, it was one of the most elaborate hoaxes that had ever been. These people had literally had tapes of the station, which was no small feat back in those days. Not like today, where we have all this gear and we can just hook up to our televisions at home, and we can either digitally or analog record things. Back in those days, if you had video gear, it was a big thing. But this group, these guys, had tape from that station when it was on the air before it had gone off the air, and they actually set up over in England, and they were able to rebroadcast this, and they were able to broadcast it on the same frequency as the BBC was on, and they were able to make this appear on the television sets, and it created this big outcry. So mystery solved on that one, and that's too bad, because it was a heck of a fun story, and it was a great mystery. But there are some things, Pat, that happen on the radio that can't be explained.
I can tell you another
I
good
think,
story like that.
oh, please do.
1938. You know what happened on October 30th of 1938?
Was that now? That was October 30th, the day before Halloween.
Yep. So
Okay.
there was a Martian ship that came down and landed in New Jersey.
I've heard about this,
That
and
was
you know they were unstoppable, weren't they?
that was the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And I'm going to tell you that I've done extensive research on this. My station has ran for 3 years now. Don't know that I'm going to do it this year, but we always run the War of the Worlds on Halloween night. I haven't decided for sure if I'm going to do that this year. I've
Somewhere
done,
Orson Welles is looking down, and he's smiling because of what you just said.
and he took that was that actually, believe it or not, had ties to amateur radio. Did you know
How
that?
so?
There was a during the I used to have the clip. I don't know if I've got it anymore. I'll try to find it for next week. There was a clip that in the midst of all that, after the Martians had come down, and there was somebody was on an amateur radio on it going, CQ,
I
CQ,
remember that.
this is blah 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 blah, CQ, can anybody hear me? True story.
That's true.
Part of that clip.
And you know, that was so convincing to people at the time. And try not to judge them, because you got to understand there was no television, and your home at the time this program came on, your home would have been dark if you were living out in the hillside in the country, because the sun went down in the wintertime at 5:30 in the afternoon, and any lighting that you had in the home was candle or a hurricane lamp or what have you. There was no electric lighting in most people's homes during that period of time. And so it's a little bit spooky anyway. And radio is the theater of the mind. And the way that radio worked, radio gets your imagination working. And even ham radio does that. I talk to certain people on a regular basis. For instance, I have a guy that I talk to out in Santa Cruz every week on CW, all the way in California, and I'm in Ohio. Now, I've never met the man. I've never seen a picture of the man, don't know anything about him, but in my mind, I have pictured what he looks like because of things that he has told me about himself. And that's what radio does. Radio creates these images in your mind. And when Orson Welles and his team were putting together the War of the Worlds, they greatly convinced a large part of our population, that indeed the Martians were here and they had landed and they were coming for you. And there were people that jumped out of buildings to their death.
Yep.
There were people that all of the circuits to the police stations and any emergency, it was just jammed because people had panicked over that program.
My mother was 8 years old when that went on, and I can remember stories she used to tell me when I was young about that particular night. And my grandfather was a smart man, and he wasn't into amateur radio or anything, but he was a garage mechanic, and he owned his own garage. Mm-hmm. And he when all that was going on, my mother said he kept saying, "This isn't real. This is not real. There's no way." And she kept saying, "Well, why isn't it real, Dad?" And he said, "Because it's switching too fast." They were going from, excuse the dogs there. They were going from one place to another. When it used to happen normally, when they went from one place to another, it was slow. It took about a minute or two to connect, and these they were almost instantaneous. If you listen to that live broadcast, you'll hear that they'll say, "We're going to connect with so and so," and then about 10-15 seconds later, he's talking. It wasn't happening back then. And that
whereas in those days, if you were going to get a feed from some other place, you literally had a man standing at a patch panel that would have to take large 1/4-inch plugs and would have to patch from one spot to another to be able to make a connection like that. So
Precisely.
that's interesting that your grandfather figured that out.
And he, when my mother used to tell me that, I think, he was a smart old guy.
Well, he knew how to work on cars, and nobody can do that today. So yeah, I guess he was a smart old guy.
But let me tell you a quick joke. Let me hit you with a quick joke, okay?
Okay.
I'm chomping at the bit here. Do you know why the Norway Navy puts barcodes on all their ships?
No.
Because when they come back in, they can scan the Navy in. They can scan the Navy in.
Well, not certain what that has to do with ham radio, but a dad joke.
Yeah, that's right.
Courtesy of Pat Morrow or Elmer. See, just goes to show you, Elmers are good for more than just ham radio advice.
I should hope so.
They know the best jokes. All right, enough of this. Well, I'll tell you what, on the radio, even though I'm a guy that I believe in goblins and all that good stuff, in fact, I'm one of the few guys on the planet that actually have run into a ghost. And I don't know too many people that can say that. But all this aside, the scariest thing I've ever heard on the radio, I was listening to 75 Meters one night, and I heard this guy over in Wisconsin talking about his colonoscopy. And that was pretty spooky. But other than that, I don't really know too many ghost stories. But there are some great stories from radio about spooky stuff. And since Halloween is coming up, I guess tonight, this is going to be The World According to Elmer Spooktacular. So CQ, 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 boo. Let's start out tonight with a video about a radio station. And I believe it's HW01. HW01, perhaps.
Yep.
We'll see.
That's what it
But,
said.
Pat, if we have that tape, can we roll that tape, please?
Well, you can sure do it. It's got to be better than my jokes. Catch you on the other side. You're listening to The World
According to Elmer on Crooked River.
Ever since I was a little kid, I have loved radio. I remember getting one of those FM car transmitters that allowed you to play your music over a radio station in the car, and that was the coolest thing to me. I joined a student radio club at university where I learned radio etiquette and how to put together a proper show, even though it is only an internet stream for the time being. But lately I have been taking to the airwaves and looking into the deeper, darker side of radio, specifically one station that I found to be intriguing and troubling, a station that consistently beams its transmissions toward the United States, a station seemingly meant for only those who can decode it. It has been given the name HM01. Now, if you don't know much about the mechanics of radio, that's fine. I'm going to give a crash course on the radio spectrum and the mechanics of radio as told by someone who isn't an expert themselves. Now, the radio spectrum is as follows. This diagram looks like a lot, but really it's not that hard to understand. From 3 kHz to 30 kHz is the very low frequency band, used mainly for submarine traffic and radio communications. From 30 kHz to 300 kHz is the long wave band. Radio-controlled clocks will actually receive long wave radio signals and synchronize themselves accordingly to adjust their time. From 300 kHz to 3 MHz is the medium wave band, most commonly recognized as the AM broadcast band. A popular station here in Ohio is 1.1 MHz or WTAM 1100. From 3 MHz to 30 MHz is the high frequency band, or more commonly known as the shortwave band. This is the band that we are going to be focusing on. And just for reference, the 30 MHz to 300 MHz is the very high frequency band, more commonly known as the FM broadcast band. A popular station here in Ohio is 96.5 MHz or KISS FM. So from this diagram, you can see that the shortwave band is sandwiched between the AM and FM broadcast bands. Now, let's talk about propagation. Propagation is a big word that just refers to how a radio wave travels. So in the AM broadcast band, the radio waves mainly travel along the ground. This allows them to follow the curvature of the Earth, and depending on the transmitter's power, allows them to travel for a few hundred miles in good broadcast conditions. I remember being able to hear WTAM 1100 in Chicago on a summer night when conditions were good. However, the FM band does not behave this way. If you've ever gone on a road trip while listening to an FM station, you know that you get about 60 miles worth of coverage before the station drops out completely. This is because the waves travel directly in a line of sight transmission. This is why FM broadcast towers are hundreds of feet tall. The taller the tower, the farther the beam can travel before it gets obstructed by the curvature of the Earth. And this is the really cool part about shortwave. It doesn't travel along the ground like AM, and it doesn't travel line of sight like FM. Instead, the radio beams bounce off the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth repeatedly, allowing the signal to travel around the entire globe in the right conditions. On good nights, it's possible to receive transmissions from Asia and Europe in North America. The shortwave radio spectrum isn't used as widely as it once was thanks to the internet, but you can still receive plenty of international programming if you know their schedules. There are, of course, amateur radio bands where licensed operators can legally communicate with each other through voice, Morse code, or other digital modes. And then there are odd transmissions. Some of these are radio beacons, high-power transmitters that only send out a repeated sound that allow you to gauge how good broadcasting conditions are at any given time. But be looking in the right place at the right time, and you might find a station that only broadcasts seemingly random strings of numbers in a computerized voice. These are the number stations, and they are used for espionage, government agencies communicating with their agents in the field. The closest thing we have to proof that these stations are the work of spy networks comes from Jack Barsky, an ex-KGB spy now living in Pennsylvania. He explains that every night he would receive a radiogram from Russia giving him useful information on what to do next.
Every Thursday night at 9:15, Barsky would tune into his shortwave radio at his apartment in Queens and listen for a transmission he believed came from Cuba.
All the messages were encrypted, that they became digits. And the digits would be sent over as in groups of 5. And sometimes it took a good hour to just write it all down, and then another 3 hours to decipher.
In the 1990s, Akin Fernandez began recording these number stations and compiled them into an album known as the Conant Project. Most of the stations in the project are now off-air, having served their purpose in the Cold War, but today there are still new stations popping up, and the internet has made finding them extremely easy. Priam.org is a website dedicated to finding the schedules of certain stations and posting them for the public, as well as providing links to internet radios where you can listen to them in real time. And this is where I discovered the station HM01. Now let's talk about the setup of a standard number station. Seconds before the broadcast, you will hear only static. Then, all of a sudden, you will hear what is known as the call sign of the station, its identifier. Usually, for most number stations, it's a 3-number group that is repeated many times before the message. Then, after a few seconds, it broadcasts the message identifier. This is usually also 3 numbers. Then the station will tell you how many numbers are in each group. In this case, it's 5. Then the actual message starts. Then the station will eventually sign off.
9, 2, 1. 9, 2, 1. 5, 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
This is the case for most number stations nowadays. Some of them broadcast in Morse code or other digitally encrypted modes, but HM01 combines both into an interesting hybrid alternative. First, the station broadcasts starting at the 57th minute of certain daytime hours, transmitting groups of 5 numbers in Spanish.
6, 5, 4, 0, 7, 3, 1, 3, 8, 3, 6, 6, 2, 8, 6, 5, 1, 1, 5, 10, 1, 3.
According to a radio operator in Brazil, call sign PY4ZBZ, the transmission is a repeated sequence of 8 groups of 6 5-digit numbers. Here's what that looks like on screen. And then after several minutes, things get weird. A piercing digital tone can be heard for several seconds.
5, 1.
Then one more 5-digit number and one more digital tone.
1, 5, 2, 1, 3.
This lasts for over half an hour and is repeated at the 57th minute of the following hour. What the f*** am I listening to? Well, we all know the numbers mean something. They are all different, but they repeat in patterns, so it's safe to say they designate what the message is for, who it's from, or what it's about. Now, the digital tones are actually data, and if you're wondering if it can be decoded, the answer is yes. Sort of. The data is encoded in a program called DigTRX, and it converts text and images into tones that can be sent over the airwaves and decoded back into the original files. So let's try and run it with HM01 and see what we get. Even the decoded messages are still encrypted text files. When exploring it with a hex editor, we can see that there is indeed a pattern, but there's no possible way to ever figure out what these messages mean. So is all hope lost? These messages all use one-time pads, one of the most efficient and foolproof ways to encode and decode a message. You start with a block of randomized text, like this one here, brought to us by the wonderful people at Learning Self-Reliance. Definitely go check them out. Then you have your message. For an example, let's just use the name Jimmy Smith. And finally, you have your cipher chart, which is just a grid of A to Z and 0 to 9 on the X and Y axis. Now we're going to set this up like an addition problem. Yay, math! Find the first letter of your message on the Y axis, then find the first letter of the one-time pad on the X axis. That point where they intersect is your encrypted letter, or character. There are numbers I wrote the script on. Do this with each letter and your message is encrypted and ready to send over shortwave to spies overseas. To decrypt your message, find the encrypted letter on the y-axis and your one-time pad letter on the x-axis. The intersecting letter is your decrypted character, in this case, J. So, are these one-time pads actually used? Well, according to the Washington Post, in 1988, 3 were found in a bar of hollowed-out soap when a Czech spy, posing as an art dealer in London, was caught by authorities as he sat in his apartment and transcribed a message sent via shortwave. This is very real, and considering this Cuban station is beamed directly at the United States is even more concerning. But we shouldn't be too concerned because a lot of these stations started popping up after World War II, so they aren't anything new. They've just been going on without us really realizing it. Espionage is going to happen even when countries are at peace with one another. You just have to hope that the messages aren't giving instructions to partake in any devastating activities. I hope this video inspired you to at least check out the dying medium that shortwave radio is. At some point, communication via the internet will go down, whether it be from natural disaster or cyber attack, and surely it will be restored at some point. But shortwave radio is something that is so simple and so easy to use that it will be the saving method of communication whenever disaster strikes. I have included links in the description where you can poke around the shortwave spectrum online or buy a portable radio yourself. Also, thanks for watching this non-abandoned related video. I wanted to produce more content on stuff that interests me, but don't worry, there's plenty of Urbex coming because it's something that I really enjoy and I'm not going to stop. So, thanks for watching, guys.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? That's good stuff. And you know, that shortwave band he's talking about, that's a ham radio band. You know, we talk about 10 meters, folks. We're talking about 28 megahertz, and we're right in the range there that he's talking about on his video tonight.
Somewhere along the lines, I heard about that H station, that H0 station.
Yeah, I think it's HM01.
Yeah,
HM01.
I think it's HM01, right? I've heard about that thing somewhere or other. I'm trying to think where I heard it from.
Well, that's the real life spooky stuff, because those are messages being sent to people that are receiving those messages. And the one thing that he said at the end that was worth noting, and may I say this is the reason that ham radio is so important, is when the day comes when communications are no longer possible, ham radio is still there, and ham radio is always possible. And I know where I can communicate with via all the different bands on the ham. I know I can go on to 40 meters. I know who I can talk to. I know where they're at in the country. I can go on to 80 meters. I can do the same thing. I know I can go on to 20 meters. If somebody in Russia wants to get a message to America, all they have to do is go on 20 meters and tap it out in code, and I can listen to it, and I can relay the message. And so we, as ham radio operators, can talk all around the world at any time that we choose. And that's not something that everybody in society can say.
Looking at that video of that encoded, I do quite a bit with FT8. I've played with PSK31 and that code that coded data was really pretty wide. I'm thinking it almost had to be almost in a little wider than even RIDI or one of the bigger translators like that. That's interesting.
Well, for those that are listening, that they're wondering what he's talking about, that's our Elmer, by the way, Pat Morrow. He's talking about RIDI, and he's talking about, you know, all these are digital modes of communication. What is worth noting about ham radio is this: radio, as we know it today in the world, was all of it at one time was amateur. Radio did not start out to be a professional deal. Radio was all amateur at one point. Even commercial broadcasting stations were all amateur in the very beginning. And all of the advances the digital modes, and all of the things that we're using today in radio all had their start amongst the amateur groups. There's nothing today that's been developed that is in use that I'm aware of that did not originally come out of amateur use, including things like the internet. And so these are things that we can thank amateurs for, but a lot of the technologies that we're using today that we have come to rely on got very humble starts.
Anybody that's using a modem, your modem came from amateur radio. We were the first to transmit data over the air, and that started out with an amateur radio packet.
The other thing that we're doing today that has now caught on in the commercial field is there are internets that are created using a web technology, whereas you put these different radio nodes on the air, the net changes and adapts to the different codes. When one small radio repeater goes off the air, then that net, which is invisible, changes because it's lost that one node. And we're doing all sorts of things with the net today that now is being used in cities commercially because it was found to be viable because it began being used by radio amateurs. And so this is all very cool stuff, and it's not stuff that's out in the future. This is stuff that's going on today, and it's kind of interesting that some of these stations have been going on and have been used since back in the Cold War days, and even prior to the Cold War days. Imagine for just a moment what it would have been like to be in World War II or World War I and have no communications. You couldn't speak to another person. It was just your little band out there, you and the sergeant and a couple of other guys, and you had your guns and you were out trying to fight the enemy. And imagine if you couldn't get any intelligence in or out of where you were. What a disaster that would have been. And so then imagine the role that radio, the gap that radio filled and the role that it played in our success during those types of conflicts. And it's not something that just America uses. Radio is a worldwide phenomenon.
And the other thing I'd like to add here is the fact that if you think back to any kind of war movies or anything like that you saw, most of that stuff was VHF, or most of that stuff was low band VHF, or it was right above the broadcast band.
Yes.
As far as your military and stuff, and those radios had to have long antennas. And could you imagine being a radio guy in a war zone?
You were a sitting duck.
Exactly, because about the time you put that antenna up, and there's a sniper looking for you.
That's exactly who they're looking for. And I have several friends that I talked to on the radio that were in the war, in Vietnam specifically, and they carried those radios, and they've told me stories of the antennas going up in the air and then the incoming bullets. And those things were, because of the type of radio they were, Pat, that you're talking about, these things were not light.
Yeah,
these were extraordinary.
They were tube radios and batteries.
Yes, exactly. And if you've ever picked up a World War II radio, I had a gentleman that I was visiting down south in Bolivar here. It was the beginning of the summer. And he said, "Hey, you're going back to Massillon, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I've got a radio for a fella up there. Can I have you help me carry it out to the car? And can you take it up to him? That way I can, I won't have to run up to Canton. You can just take it for me." And I said, "Of course, Max, I'll be happy to do that for you." And I thought it was curious that he thought he was going to need help carrying this radio, because what's a radio weigh, right? This radio had to weigh 150 pounds, Pat. In fact, I think I still have back damage from trying to carry that thing out to the trunk. I put the thing in the car, and the back of the car sit down, and I thought, whoa. And so I hauled this thing for him back up to Canton, and this poor fellow that bought the radio from him, the two of us like to never get that thing in his house. And then he wanted me to help him take it down the basement stairs. I said, you're going to have to go get a dolly or something. Literally, this AM radio had to have a weight of at least 150 pounds. It had these big, enormous transformers in it.
One of the back about a year or so ago, one of the guys from my club did a presentation on the evolution of radio.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from a World War II radio that the guy strapped on his back, the telephone that was with it, and all that, all clear up to pretty much today's radios. That was so impressive. And even the MASH style of radio phones, and he had one of them. It was pretty interesting discussion. And it took 6 of us to get the stuff in there, because all that equipment was really heavy. It's not like what you got today. Heck,
if you ever turn the radio on and you hear a number station, now you'll know what it is.
My Icon back there weighs about 4 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my point. I have these Swan radios at home, and they're not light, but neither are they 150 pounds. I would say the average Swan, my average radio here at my place is probably 25 pounds. But this thing here was a backbreaker. Yeah. I thought I'm going to have to go get a hernia belt to try to get this thing down the stairs. Not doing it. So I told him, I said, my back is
not happening.
Can't do that one for you. Wish I could. He was going to need help with that, trust me. But that's what it was. And all of this stuff that we have is all had its humble beginnings in amateur radio. We've got another video now on our Spooktacular here, spooky things. And these are some radio signals that were heard that are unexplainable and are creepy. And so let's just continue in the same vein today, Pat.
All righty.
You're listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio. That is our Elmer. In Nate, oh, quiet, please. And I am, I'm Gerry, KG8RRY. We'll be back on the other side of this video.
Oops.
Hey guys, I'm currently editing this thing, and something cool happened a couple days ago. Luckily I realized it, so I could put it in this video. But it was the 2018 field day for the American Radio Relay League, and basically it's a period of 24 hours where all amateur radio operators who want to participate can get on air, and you just try to contact as many other people as possible. And it's just like this big international contest. I went to my local radio club, who is stationed at Whips Ledges. It's the highest point in the county that I live in. And they had like 5 or 6 different antennas, a couple different radios, and they were camping out 24 hours. And I'm not sure how many contacts we got. We didn't get as many as the years prior. But I made a few contacts, and it was a lot of fun. So if you guys want to learn about getting your amateur radio license, I included a link in the description. And here's the video and pictures from Field Day 2018. Thanks, guys.
That's not the right video, is it?
I don't think that's the right one.
Spooky.
Don't you just love live radio?
Now let me see what I can come up here.
No, that's not the one. That's not what we were going for. We were going for 5 strange and unusual radio transmissions. Okay, let me do this real quick. Now I'm going to go ahead and send this over to you, Pat, since we're doing this live.
Okay, I will see about getting it put in.
And now, if this is the same thing, then that means that the problem is not ours. It belongs with the service. Now, this says it's the right one. And you should have it.
Okay, I heard it coming over there. I've got to turn around here. So. Ad-lib a little bit.
Strange and unusual transmissions. Well, a lot of them are, and some are stranger than others. It just depends. For those of you that are in the Ohio area, listen up. Those are in Ohio or Pennsylvania or someplace close. We're going to have a ham fest, and it's going to be this upcoming weekend. It's going to be on Halloween Sunday, which is the 31st, of course. And we're going to get underway at 8 o'clock in the morning at a place called the Maps Museum. And the Maps Museum is on the back of the Canton-Akron Airport, which is south of Cleveland, Ohio. Basically, this sits on Route 77, and it is in the north of Canton and south of Akron, in between the area, in an area called Green. It's easy to access, and anywhere from in Ohio, just get to 77, and you won't have any trouble finding it. But at any rate, we're going to have an exam session for those who are interested in becoming a ham radio operator. Perhaps you've been studying and you don't know a place to go take your test. I'll be part of that, and they asked me if I would come help with the administration of the exams. So I'll be part of a team that is doing that. There will be numerous tables there. There will be vendors from all over the state and beyond the state that are coming in to sell ham radio gear. So come, even if you're not looking for anything in specific, the great thing about a ham fest is you never know what treasures you'll find that you didn't know you were looking for. But there'll be something for you to take home, I assure you. I've never gone to a ham fest and come home with nothing in my hands. Plan to bring cash. That's all I can tell you on that one. But it'll be a good time. Plus, you'll get a chance to meet people that you won't see until the next ham fest. And so you'll make some friends and have some great takeaways from what will be a good time. So again, that's this upcoming Sunday, and it's going to be at the Canton-Akron Airport at the Maps Air Museum, which is a World War II museum. It's got airplanes there, has service memorabilia. There are things from other wars there also. But if you never had a chance to go to Maps, Maps is a good time. And if you're into military and you're into memorabilia and you're into those things, that we associate with the different branches of the military service and wartime and what it was like to be in the service during that period of time, then you'll be fascinated by the things that you'll see at Maps. Plus,
hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me today for another video.
All right,
so in this video,
hang
we're
on
going to be
just a
looking
second
at
here.
5 strange or unusual radio transmissions.
No, you're
Don't
good.
Worry, we're not going to be looking at the things
I was
that
done
are in
anyway.
YouTube
So
videos
anyway,
out there, such as
if you're
number
from
stations and things like that.
in driving
A while
distance,
ago,
if you
I
want
put out
to fly
a
in,
request
whatever it is,
to you
come
guys
join
to
us.
send me anything you've recorded from the radio which you think may be strange, unusual, funny, or interesting. And quite a lot of you sent things in. And from these and my own archives, I thought.
All right, I'll start this over again here in a second.
Okie dokie. Now this one is supposed to be about unusual and unexplained radio signals.
Do a series of videos if these actually seem popular. Well, if this video seems popular, and if you. Hi.
Okay, now we go.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me today for another video. So in this video, we're going to be looking at 5 strange or unusual radio transmissions. And don't worry, we're not going to be looking at the things that are in all the other YouTube videos out there, such as number stations and things like that. A while ago, I put out a request to you guys to send me anything you've recorded from the radio which you think may be strange, unusual, funny, or interesting. And quite a lot of you sent things in. And from these and my own archives, I thought I'd do a series of videos if these actually seem popular. Well, if this video seems popular and if you enjoy it. So here are 5 strange or unusual radio recordings. This was recorded a few years ago when a privately chartered Gulfstream flying eastbound 100 miles or so off the west coast of Ireland was experiencing interference on one of the Shannon North Atlantic oceanic transition frequencies, specifically 122.975. As you'll hear in the clip, they requested a frequency change which was agreed with Shannon Air Traffic Control, and the controller actually asked what the interference was, and the American pilot tells her that they were hearing a prayer service on that frequency, and this was actually investigated by the Irish Office of Communications.
Shannon, number 572, Echo Charlie, do you have another frequency?
Echo Charlie, AFM 125.875.
875, Echo Charlie. This Shannon, number 572, Echo Charlie, on 25.875, how do you read?
Number 572 Echo Charlie, Shannon read you 5. How many?
5 by 5, Echo Charlie. And Echo Charlie was picking up a prayer on that previous frequency.
Say again, you were picking up a what?
A Christian prayer.
You're serious?
Yes, ma'am. Hail Mary.
Okay.
So this clip originates from around 1992, and my contact at the Laughing Policeman Wireless Society gave me permission to use this clip. So the recording features their lifetime president Nigel Hopkins, G1XYU, giving his thoughts about when the DTI, formerly the GPO and now Ofcom, visited his residence. Nigel actually had his licence revoked in the late 1980s and then reinstated in late 1991, and by 1992 he was already attracting the attention of the DTI in the West Midlands area.
Yes, they don't like it, do they? They turned up in Peugeots and they went away in ambulances. Oh my God, they've turned up and they bust all these pirate radio stations around Brum with no trouble whatsoever. And then they turned up to see me. You'll notice they've not come back, you know, I mean, wonder why they've not bothered to come back, you know, what is it? Fear? This is a call!
So this next clip is an example of the UK Home Office main scheme for police VHF traffic mobiles. And the clip came from Staffordshire Police. Now M2YM was the call sign of Staffordshire Police at the time, as was M2CK. And when they switched to airwave, they eventually switched off the VHF Hilltop sites. The main scheme was administered by the Home Office, and a number of engineers were actually radio amateurs, hence this guy got the job of doing the close down. The clip actually originates from Staffordshire in around the mid-2000s.
This is Alpha 34 at Yankee Mike, channel 1, 154.625. This channel is closing down today, Friday the 3rd of March 2006 for the very last time. This is Alpha 34 at Yankee Mike on channel 1, closing down.
So this recording was sent to me a number of years ago and sounds like some sort of altitude telemetry being transmitted in the 70cm amateur band. It was actually on 434.275, and this type of transmission is usually sent by equipment on remote control aircraft. The actual source of the signal remains unknown, and it originated from the West Yorkshire area.
1,808 feet.
Pirate Radio Essex was a special station that the BBC had up and running for the 40th anniversary of the notorious pirate radio broadcasters. The following is a genuine recording of somebody jamming and managing to take over the link to the transmitter. It's unsure who caused the interference and whether they were ever caught.
Fast and factual from the LV-18. Local, national and international news.
Pirate BBC Essex.
It's 4 o'clock.
Hang on, Fred Spider. Here's the news. Pirate BBC Essex has taken over today by a pirate. A Swedish pirate who's come all the way up from the south coast to squeak on the wireless. Fred Spider's his name. He goes all over the country. Fred Spider! Hello! Oh, there's fishing ship shops open in Harwich. Lovely fishing ships down there. I'm going to get some. Lovely!
Now today, a leading mortgage lender says prices are soaring in the north, but the divide with the south is far more obvious. No free fish. Anglers in the county are...
That's a bugger! I'll be out later! I shall have more fishing ships!
Bank holiday fishing. People without rod licenses from the...
And finally, I just wanted to include this piece of audio from Ian, who said back in the 1980s there were unusual tones broadcast around 107.5 to 108 megahertz. This was the same time when the police could be heard around 100 megahertz. I've looked everywhere online but cannot find this audio to confirm just what it was. I presume it's something to do with planes, but I've never managed to confirm this. From memory, I've managed to recreate the sound using music software, so please take a listen to the attached MP3, which is a short audio clip of this sound. I think I heard it between 1976 and 1984, and it was on 24 hours a day. Do you have any ideas what it is? So here's the clip, guys, and if you have any idea what it is, then drop me a comment below so I can get back to Ian. Okay, there we go. So 5, well just over 5, but 5 interesting or unusual radio clips. I've got plenty more coming, so if you enjoyed this, then let me know and I'll do another video on this. As I say, you guys sent me a lot of audio, and I've got a lot of audio in my archives as well to include, so if you enjoy this video, then we'll do a bit of a series on it. I just thought it'd be nice to share some of these strange, unusual and funny and interesting clips. So if you have any and you want to send any, then please send them over to ringwaymanchester@mail.com. The email address is on the screen and in the description below, and I'll include it in an upcoming video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, then make sure you subscribe. And all that's left to say is 7-3. We'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
Too funny. You know, that goes from the strange to the hilarious. I'm sorry. The two parts of that clip that stood out to me when I was going through them earlier. Number one, if you're on an airplane and you're piloting an airplane, and you find that you're interrupted by someone doing the Hail Mary, maybe that says something about the upcoming portion of the flight. I think I'd be paying attention to that one. And the other was the very serious, of course, British radio transmission that got interrupted by the pirate radio station, and that was funny. I'm sorry.
Did you see that here recently where that they're getting that radio signal from space that they don't know what it is?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when I was down at the GBT, the Green Bank Telescope, which is also known to the locals there as the Great Big Thing, which is a large radio telescope in West Virginia. We were down there, my wife and I were down there a couple weeks ago on our 40th wedding anniversary, and we had a chance to tour the Green Bank Telescope, the GBT, and all the other radio telescopes there. And it is kind of interesting. The Green Bank Telescope isn't specifically monitoring that transmission, but there is a station in Canada that has been specifically designed to monitor that incoming transmission. No one is quite certain what it is yet, but these radio antennas that are monitoring that signal actually sit right down on the ground. They look like a ham radio NVIS setup, but they're down on the ground and they're super cooled. And the reason they use supercooling technology is because supercooling technology, they get the receiver of the radio down to 1 degree above absolute zero, and that eliminates the QRN, the natural noise that occurs in the antenna and in the receiver. But there's a station that is using that specialty antenna up in Canada, and they are monitoring that signal, and they're trying to discover what that is.
Yeah, that's. I'm curious to see what they end up finding with that. Could it be little
they
green men?
have always found a reason for that stuff in the past, and if you think back down through the years, it seems like every 5 or 10 years there's some signal they can't identify, and that makes big news. Eventually, they figure out what it is. I mean, the first one sounded like a count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they were listening. This was back way back. We're talking the 1950s now, and it took them a long time to try to decipher what that signal was, but they did eventually figure out they were listening to the sound that a pulsar makes, and so eventually they figure out what it is they're listening to. Although, and this is fitting for our Spooktacular today, although SETI, which is the
Search
group
for
that is looking for
extraterrestrial.
extraterrestrial activity, does have time and space on the Great Big Thing. And they are continuing to run studies, and they are continuing to listen for other intelligent life out there somewhere.
I did the search for intelligent life with them for the better part of 3 years. They used to have that screensaver every time the
Yes.
screensaver would come
you
on.
allowed them to use your computing power when you weren't using your computer?
Yep. That's pretty cool.
Well, they also take time on the radio telescopes, and they are granted time on the radio telescopes to continue to search. So it will be interesting to see. They're just looking for some signal. They don't know exactly what they're looking for, but they're looking for a signal that has an unknown origin, that has an intelligent, and the computers can figure out if it's an intelligent conversation or an intelligent signal versus just some random noise. So we have the technology to know the difference between the two now. So it'll be interesting in the next few years to see if there's anything that shows up.
Yep.
Do you think there's anybody out there, Pat?
Oh yeah, I've always thought that.
Yeah.
We can't be alone in this universe, and everything is way too big. There's no way that we can be the only ones in it.
And on that note,
I've read this article that they think that there is salt water in the bottom pole, the southern pole of Mars. And they're thinking that there could be actual life there. The Chinese discovered it, and they're talking now about sending a couple of probes there and everything else to try to see what they can find there. But there's supposed to be ice and water under the ground in the bottom part of the planet. Ought to be interesting.
That's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the Green Bank Telescope, the GBT, one of the discoveries that it has made, it's made many discoveries, but one of the big discoveries that it found is it found that there are complex molecules in space, and there have to be complex molecules for life to exist. And one of the complex molecules that they found in outer space was sugar, the same molecule that we have here on the planet Earth. And they found it way out in outer space.
Interesting.
So it's incredible, the stuff that they can, quote, see, even though they're not using eyes, they're using ears, but they can see. One of the big problems with the radio telescopes always was trying to figure out a way to visualize what you were hearing. And we're very visual creatures. And most of all that we process through our eyes. Well, a radio telescope doesn't process anything visually. It processes everything through audio. And so with computer models and computer modeling, now we have a much better source of visualizing what we're hearing than we ever have before. So I'm expecting big discoveries in the next few years.
Yeah, I just hope it's before you and I are still around. I'd love to. Yeah. I want to see them get on Mars before I go. That's one big thing. I don't know that that's going to happen. I also know that the other thing, there's supposed to be, I think in the next year or so, a telescope that's actually going up to kind of sort of replace the Hubble, but they're going to put it way out there. You know, they're going to send it about halfway to Mars, from my understanding of it. And that could be interesting stuff. You know, you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and just think of the pictures you should be able to get that way.
Well, that's right, because the biggest distraction to any kind of a visual telescope is light. And so the idea of getting the telescope out beyond the Earth and the Earth's atmosphere is to get away from the light. It's like the same thing with a radio telescope. The thing that is endangering to the ability of a radio telescope to discover is its inability to hear because of QRM and QRN. And so reducing noise is very important. Even a simple cell phone puts off a tremendous amount of noise. We're surrounded. We're right now drowning in a sea of noise, whether you realize it or not. Yep. It's everywhere around us. That's and so, right. So that, if they can get that telescope out away from the Earth, it will be amazing what they can see. It's the same with your ham radio station. We've talked about it ad nauseum. If you want to improve your station, get rid of the noise. Noise is a big deal.
Yeah, doesn't have, you can still talk the world on 100 watts, and you can hear a lot better at zero noise level.
Absolutely.
And that's it for this week.
Yeah, that's right. Happy, spooky Halloween. CQ, 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 boo. Get out there on Halloween. And by the way, on the Friday before, you need to call Anthony. On the Friday before Halloween, Friday night, beginning at 4 o'clock and going until midnight, wherever you are, it is the zombie shuffle.
I saw that.
That'll be out on the bands. And so I have my zombie number and I'm ready to go. That is a QRP contest, and that is on the Friday night before Halloween. Just Google Zombie Shuffle. It'll come up.
Anybody that's interested in talking or broadcasting or whatever on satellite, amateur radio satellite, my club is doing a presentation tomorrow night at 7:30. There's a guy that's going to come in by the name of Mel Vi, VYE, and I believe he's N8VYE, and he's our satellite guy. And this guy, he launches balloons and he loves satellites, and he's done some of the most interesting satellite communications I've ever seen as demonstrations for us. So if you get a chance tomorrow night, go to cfarc.org, cfarc.org. The Zoom link will be there for the meeting. It'll be called the activity meeting. And if you get a chance, come on in and take a look at it.
We'll try to listen in tomorrow night.
You'll be impressed.
That stuff's right up my alley. You know that.
But, get a chance, come on over, Jerry. You're more than welcome.
Sounds good.
All right.
My friend, it's been a great show. Thank you very much, Pat. And we even got to see a little bit of field day, which we weren't planning on. So there you go. That was a bonus presentation tonight. The Dead Air and the field day presentation brought to you by Crooked River Radio. We'll see you guys next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock here on Crooked River Radio. On the program, The World According to Elmer. That's our Elmer, Pat Morrow, N8OQP. I'm Jerry, KG8RRY. 73, everyone.
Have a good week. 7-3.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. See you again soon.